Welcome back. So that supposed announcement of an increase in value-added tax has become a hot political potato. That follows Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana suffering a major blow, as some people say, after the GNU deadlocked over his 2025 budget, particularly due to his expected proposal of hiking VAT by a whopping 2 percentage points that would move it from 15 to 17%. Experts generally hold the view that the VAT burden weighs heavily on the poor and low-income earners. With South Africa's ever-rising cost of living, how would such an increase affect them, particularly social grant recipients? Some people are now even accusing government of giving one hand, or giving on the one hand and taking on the other. Let's continue unpacking yesterday's development. Bring in now sociologist Dr. Khwezi Mabasa, who joins us via our video link. Doc, great to have you back on the SABC. Thanks very much indeed, as always, for making time. From where I'm sitting, there's a conflict of two main issues in the main. One, raising enough revenue for the government, which we all agree is needed. And two, asking at what cost that should happen.
Morning to Ayanda and morning to the viewers as well. I think definitely there are contestations on how to expand the revenue of government. And I think yesterday's discussion on VAT highlighted that. But the reality is that if we want to expand the revenue of government, we have to look at doing it in ways that don't increase the burden on poor households and individuals and look at different options. And my point is that we need to look beyond just the VAT debate and look at sourcing revenue from diverse sources, which include the possibility of increasing corporate tax, taking up the discussion around wealth tax also seriously. There's also been proposals around introducing a financial transaction tax as well, and curbing the illicit financial flows. And there are a host of other interventions that have been tabled that go beyond just the current VAT proposition. And I think we need to take those seriously.
Of course, the concern here is that sometimes what you gain on the one side, you lose on the other. For example, the first two suggestions you made around increasing corporate tax and wealth tax. I mean, I've heard a pushback against that, saying something along the lines of, if you target the corporates, it's either they'll close down and lay off people, which will contribute to the unemployment numbers, or in fact, we might find ourselves in a situation where they take their business elsewhere. Concerns around the wealth tax increase is that we simply don't even have enough of an understanding of people's wealth. In other words, the wealth profile of South Africans hasn't been documented. And so this is more of a long-term solution to more of our short-term problems.
Yeah, so I mean, this argument about corporates leaving the shores because of an increased tax is, for me, I think it's a bit alarmist. Because if you look at our corporate tax rates and compare it to other countries, you can see that other countries also have corporate tax rates that are over 20%. And I think when people raise this, it's often based on those assumptions and not even take into consideration some of the comparable international dynamics. I think there's been several studies that have been conducted on wealth in the country. I know, for example, centers such as the Southern Center for Inequality Studies has conducted some studies on wealth and to try and ascertain what the implications would be of introducing a wealth tax and to try and get a clear picture of how wealth is held within the country. And we need to look into those studies so that we can then develop the proposal around the wealth tax based on that information.
Sure. There's also real, I suppose, debate now about, the extent to which the country's social welfare system is helping or not. And I wonder if you can just break down your thinking around this. I mean, I'm sure you followed it. On the one hand, there's real worries about creating dependency on the state, money which seems to just be given to people. But on the other, there's been a lot said about how all of that money actually comes back and may very well drive economic growth.
Yeah, I think the comments about social wage and social transfers being unproductive and creating dependency are based on biased economic assumptions and not actually on facts. So, I mean, if you look at the research in terms of social grants, it's clear that they are used to obtain basic foodstuffs and services. But secondly, we know that individuals also use the social transfers to support other forms of livelihoods and work in communities, including in some cases micro enterprises. But also the social grants create demand in the economy, which is crucial for economic growth. So I think this idea that it's wasteful expenditure creates dependency is quite problematic. And I think what we also have to think about is how do we link social grants to restructuring the economy? So if the social grants are used to let's say, buy foodstuffs, one can link that to developing localized food systems, which includes different types of retailers. And then the grant actually supports industrial policy and economic restructuring broadly. But the argument around it being unproductive and not contributing to economic development or creating dependency is quite flawed. And actually, people do use the grant for productive purposes, in my view.
Yeah. Everybody agrees, though, that the real silver bullet, for lack of a better term, is just growing the economy. And it seems we're really struggling to get that right. Even in this particular budget that was turned down, I mean, a lot of it has been leaked, and we've been able to see that the finance minister was projecting a growth of around 1.9%, a far cry from the kind of growth that would really, for example, create jobs and have South Africa's society shift from one where so many people depend on the state to them sustaining themselves. The question, of course, is how do you get that right?
Yeah, well, I think the issue is that we have this term inclusive growth everywhere in our policy documents and in discourses, but we clearly disagree on how to achieve it. So for me, I think the one thing that we have to do to grow the economy is address the issue of inequality, because several studies have proven that inequality impedes economic growth and development in several ways. So that's why it's important to have redistributive policies that deal with inequality. The second thing that I think we have to do is we have to pick key sectors that build on the comparative advantages that South Africa has in terms of resources and also human capabilities. And that's why I support the government's emphasis on industrialization and rebuilding the country's manufacturing base, because that assists us in developing a sectoral approach to economic development and growth. I think the other thing that's important is that we have to improve public goods and services in order to achieve economic development and growth as well. There's also a debate about the cost of capital in South Africa, and the fact that we have to review the effect that our monetary policy has on the cost of capital. And there are several suggestions on how to address this as well. So these are some of the key interventions that we can institute to achieve economic development and growth in the country. And it's important to not only look at GDP, but we also have to look at the nature of that growth to deal with the underlying structural impediments.
Absolutely. And the debate continues, as they say. Dr. Khwezi Mabasa, thanks for adding your voice. I appreciate your time on the SABC. Dr. Mabasa is a sociologist as we continue taking stock of what yesterday's announcement, at least what the implications are now that the debate has been postponed.